Over the past year, I was able to watch every single Gundam show, other than the SD Gundams, because why would I watch those? So I figured, hey, let's just make some review, sort of summing them up, showing what each one's really kind of about, and what I thought of them. Just to sort of justify my ratings, for me a 5 out of 10 is worth it. It is a pass. It is something that I felt was worth my time. You know, I don't shift it up to a 7 being average. Also, I'm no expert on Gunpla, so any amount of quality that comes from the kits that were made from the show, I have no idea. I'm just judging the anime, no merch stuff. When I talk about mech design, I'm just talking about in the anime, not about how it works in real life, or you know, I know there's anger over some sets which may or may not have come out. Yeah, I'm going to try and keep this mostly spoiler free, but, you know, tread carefully. First up is 0079, the original. I honestly didn't expect this to be this good. While the animation is incredibly dated, the story was surprisingly not so. Amuro was a fine protagonist, though I didn't care for the subtle romance between him and Fraubo that never really went anywhere. Sayla was also a surprisingly good character with an interesting personal journey throughout the series, and I really wish that we got more of her in later shows. Of course though, Char was the star of the show, and how could he not be easily the best character in the original series, if not all of the Universal Century timeline, and his revenge plot against the Zabi family was easily the peak of the original series, and his interesting dynamics with Lala and Sayla gave him the most room to get fleshed out as a character, I feel. The battles were not so amazing, and the design was very primitive, but it's the first one, so I'll let it slide. And hey, the final fight was some fencing battle in zero gravity, which is not what I was expecting at all, and it's not the type of ending that any other Gundam show has done since, so props to that. Overall, I'd give 0079 a 7 out of 10. Zeta was exactly what a sequel to the original should have done. The characters and politics from the first one really got fleshed out and really showed that just fighting some battles in space isn't going to solve everyone when you're all living in the entire solar system. Camille is probably my favorite protagonist of the Universal Century and probably my second favorite overall, and his relationship with Char and his rivalry with Jared really fleshed him out into a great character who could surpass Amuro with his talents and skills. Char is also in peak form in this series. The shades, excellent work on him. He looks so good in them, don't get me started. And his mentor role with Camille is absolutely amazing and was perfect for his character. Zeta also has some of the best villains in this franchise. I mean, of course I mentioned Jared, who was good and all, you know, with him and Camille going back and forth, basically just killing each other's girlfriends. And with Haman and Shirako, I thought were peak villains. They were so great. I love the master manipulator type of enemy that Shirako embodied, even getting in the last word, so to speak, at the end of his battle with Camille. Haman was great for the enemy who's more lurking in the shadows and you know will strike, but isn't pressing you right now. It's too bad that her character didn't really remain as strong in the sequel. The new type abilities I felt were best handled in Zeta. The original didn't exactly do anything wrong with them, other than introducing them pretty late into the show, so they wouldn't really get that much focus. However, the use of spirits and mental connections were great for making new types a type of power that really showed how it could connect to people to a greater degree. The suits in Zeta were also a big step up, and I especially enjoyed the Cubely. It's probably one of my favorites. The battles were much better for it, and I was blown away coming from the original. I'd give Zeta an 8 out of 10. Double Zeta is a step down, honestly. The silly tone in the first half was so jarring after coming off of Zeta, especially since timeline-wise, it starts almost immediately after the ending of Zeta, which was quite serious. I thought that Judah was not a good protagonist, and really didn't enjoy the antics that he got up to. Mashamir and Glemmy were also villains that I didn't really enjoy, but at least Glemmy was better than Mashamir and was more competent. Having Haman fall in love with Judah was just really weird, and she was just a much weaker character overall compared to her appearance in Zeta, which is really unfortunate because she had a great showing there. The mobile suits, again, were mostly the same as in Zeta, except for, of course, the main Gundam, which I thought was over-designed compared to the original Gundam Zeta. And I have to say, the whole wanting to be Judah's sister plotline with Plea was very weird. I didn't like how much it ran through the whole show. And the resolution of his sister being alive the whole time anyways was such a cop-out. There was a real big plot tumor on the show. Overall, I'd give Double Zeta a 4 out of 10. Char's Counterattack is the first Gundam movie that's not a compilation, and it's pretty alright. As the title implies, Char is a big focus of this movie, which is always a plus, though it could have done without a certain aspect of his characterization in this movie. Ultimately, this movie really just sets up for the final battle between Char and Amuro, and it's definitely a good one. The animation is pretty nice, and it got a movie bump, and it did a great job of closing out the Universal Century, for now at least. Char's Counterattack gets a 7 out of 10 from me. War in the Pocket is easily the most low-key Gundam entry, but it's a choice that really works for this OVA series. Experiencing the one-year war on a small scale from the perspective of a child was a great showcase for the theme that Gundam always has of how horrible war is. Plus it also explains why Amuro never got an upgrade for the Gundam in 0079 when mid-season's upgrades became standard fare for the rest of the franchise and mecha in general. I could really feel the bond between Al and Bernie growing through the series, culminating in a pretty tragic ending. It's not that long, so there's not that much to say, but it's a very short and sweet series. I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. F91 is a strange entry. It was originally supposed to be a full series, that they then took the first chunk of and squished together to make a movie when the plans for the whole series fell through. Knowing that explains a lot about why the movie is the way it is, but that doesn't mean it's great. It really does feel like you're only seeing one piece of a much larger story with a lot of gaps in the middle. The action is pretty good, and the storyline with Cecily was good also, but again, it's unfinished and it doesn't really have that much of a resolution. There is a manga that follows the events of the movie, I think, but I'm just reviewing the anime. F91 gets a 6 out of 10. Stardust Memory is an interesting OVA series, though I didn't know it when I was watching it for the first time. Most OVAs in the Universal Century tend to be set during the one-year war, but Stardust Memory is instead set between 0079 and Zeta, and sets up how the Titans were formed and paves the way for Zeta, if you were to watch it chronologically. It also sheds some light on Anaheim Electronics, the group that developed a lot of the mobile suits in the series. Unfortunately, this series also switched directors halfway through in a very obvious way, so if you're going to watch it, expect a lot of sudden characterization changes from episode 4 to 5, mostly for the worst. The action is pretty good and the animation is alright. Stardust Memory does have its share of good characters and an ending I really didn't expect. Nina Purpleton is absolutely the worst girl though. I'm giving Stardust Memory a 7 out of 10. Victory Gundam, where do I start? That's a legitimate question considering the awkward ordering of the beginning few episodes due to production interference. The art style changed a bit for this entry in a way that I'm not exactly a fan of compared to the older style. The mobile suits were also at their absolute ugliest in this entry if you ask me, and I didn't really care for anyone in this series aside from the protagonist Uso, who is actually a pretty nice good boy that everyone just needed to learn to be nice to. There's not really much I cared for in this entry and it was honestly a slog for me to get through, but hey, there's a scene where women in bikinis and jetpacks try to take down a Gundam, so there's that. 3 out of 10. G Gundam was such a palate cleanser after Victory. It is easily the least Gundam show, but that's totally fine. The action here is top notch, and the fights and setting are just awesome, and that's what this entry is trying to be. Just awesome. No deep plot or amazing real robot battles. I mean, they built the Statue of Liberty in space and had to shoot lasers. How can you not love that? Each of the core 5 characters is amazing in their own right, with maybe George as a weak link, but still. Every nation's Gundam being so stereotypical to their country was absolutely hilarious, and it made for some pretty unique abilities. Also, Alan B and Rain are the second and third best girls in the franchise. Don't at me. The final battle is easily the best final battle in any Gundam, and probably in my top 10 final battles for all anime. If you want to try Gundam, but want to ease in from Super Robot, this is the one for you. 9 out of 10. Gundam Wing was a good series, though perhaps not as good as it was hyped up to me. The 5 core characters were all pretty good, and Relina was a pretty good love interest and the political type of character. Obviously the rejected invitation scene is easily the most iconic scene in all of Gundam, but for me it was Treize Kushranada who really stole the show, and Zex is where we get our first complete Char clone. While the rest took aspects of Char and had some form of mask, this is the one that really went all out in trying to look exactly like him. The mobile suit signs were alright, and the battles were pretty good too, with some really cool ones sprinkled in. I just thought it took the plot too long to get anywhere, and I really didn't enjoy Hero as the protagonist. I felt it probably should have been one of the other 4 characters more than him. Relina's journey was actually probably the most interesting to me. I'm giving Gundam Wing a 6 out of 10. The 08th mobile suit team is Okay, I had this one really hyped up for me, and I can see why. If you're looking for some real robot, then this is exactly the series for you. The characters are also the kind that really make you want to root for them, like they're in some form of, 70s or 80s war movie. My main issue is with the extremely forced romance that doesn't feel genuine at all, especially compared to the other bonds that were forged throughout this series. The battles also weren't that amazing due to them wanting to be more realistic, which again, if that's something that you're looking for, you'll see that as a huge plus. And it has a very strange final episode. I'm giving it a 5 out of 10. After War Gundam X is okay. I like that it brought back new types, and having the love interest be the strong new type instead of the protagonist was refreshing, but that's about as positive as I can get with this series. I really didn't enjoy the mobile suit design or the characters. It definitely got better near the end, which I found out later was because they actually had to speed things up due to basically getting cancelled. Overall, I found it to be very slow, but it's a good show for showing a what-if scenario for if the Universal Century timeline had kept going with colony drops and new type abilities. 4 out of 10. Endless Waltz is the movie finale for Gundam Wing, and it's about as good. I like the new Gundam design, but overall, it just felt like a nice epilogue for Wing. Not much to say. 6 out of 10. Turn A Gundam is extremely unique, but in a very good way. The mobile suit designs were so good, and the art style really suited the series. For having the most OP Gundams in the entire franchise, the series is surprisingly low-key and character-focused. While the whole Princess Switch subplot was pretty contrived, it did at least lead to some interesting character interactions and dynamics that I quite enjoyed. Harry Ord is also a complete Chad. And the music. Yoko Kanno is amazing as always, and gave Turn A Gundam what is easily the best soundtrack in the franchise. Honestly, if you're not even going to watch the show, just listen to the music, it's that good. Additionally, the story of Turn A trying to wrap up the entirety of Gundam was really cool, though I don't know if it was executed that well. 6 out of 10. G Savior. No. 0 out of 10. Gundam Seed was a series that I was really expecting to hate from how much everyone told me that it sucked, but I actually loved it. The suit designs I thought were amazing, and I'm always a thought for overly dramatic names like Justice Gundam and Freedom Gundam. The fights were amazing, and I really loved Kira, Athrun, and Kigali, though I wasn't a fan of Lacus. The politics in Seed were also probably my favorite for how they all interacted. The animation was fairly good, though they did reuse scenes over and over. I watched the HD version, so it wasn't as bad as in the original. I know some people didn't like the melodrama between the characters, but I live for that kind of stuff, so I thought it was amazing. I have never rewatched a full Gundam series, but if I were, this would be the one. 9 out of 10. IGLOO. I really didn't like IGLOO. I don't care for the 1-year war by this point, and I especially don't care when it's presented in absolutely atrocious CGI. The story was okay, but I couldn't pay attention because the visuals were just that bad. 2 out of 10. Seed Destiny is, well, it's not as good as Seed, but I still enjoyed it. The mobile suits were just as well designed as ever, and they had even more dramatic names now. I actually thought Shin was a great protagonist for showing the conflicting sides of a story, and Destiny really gave Athrun more time to shine, which I enjoyed. However, I did not enjoy the 2 Lacuses, because why? Why was that subplot a thing? Why is it so stupid? I don't know these choices. Durandal was also a good villain, especially for a sequel series that really focused on the colony versus Earth warfare. I also greatly enjoyed the ending of the HD remaster, which is an improvement from the original. Unpopular, I know, but I'd give it an 8 out of 10. Stargazer was an okay OVA. I don't know, I didn't really feel any type of way about it, but it was quite short, and it was more Cosmic Era timeline. Watch it if you really want more Cosmic Era, I suppose. 4 out of 10. IGLOO I was very excited for. However, I did not enjoy it as much as I had hoped. I didn't really enjoy any of the characters that much. They felt more boring than any kind of group that had previously been shown in Gundam, and Setsuna was an insanely bland protagonist. None of the team dynamics were really that interesting, and the mobile suit design was just okay. Nothing bad, but nothing special. Honestly, I don't really have much to say because I found both seasons of this just quite boring and a chore to get through. 4 out of 10. Gundam Unicorn was amazing. I was honestly very unsure of how well the UC entries would be after F91 and Victory, and with every other entry winding back to the 1-year war, but Unicorn was an amazing entry. Easily the best mobile suit designs of the entire franchise, with the Banshee as my all-time favorite. The characters were great, the music was great, I loved the reveal of what Laplace's box was, and it was so great. That's all I can really say about this. Menasher and Minerva made a great team, and Minerva is the best girl, don't at me. I was really surprised they brought her back after showing her as an 8-year-old puppet queen in Zeta, but I'm so glad they did and showed that she had become so cunning and politically savvy. And combining that with Menasher's combat ability made them a great team. And of course, it has full frontal, aka thick Char. I love that they brought him back in this form, as yeah, emotionally he probably wasn't as ready as Amuro was, and it was nice the way that they finally sent his character off. Also, the ending to Unicorn is beautiful. I wish it had honestly been the end for the whole Universal Century, but of course it wasn't. My one gripe with Unicorn is that it is easily the hardest Gundam to get into, seeing as it draws on plot points from the first 3 shows and Char's Counterattack, which makes it not the best entry for beginners despite being the best one. 10 out of 10. Awakening of the Trailblazer. Well, this certainly was a 00 movie that has aliens. Yep. I didn't enjoy it. It was just 00 except even more stupid. 3 out of 10. Gunpla builders beginning in G. Well, that certainly was an ad for Gunpla. I mean, all of Gundam is, but this was very egregious. At least the later series that followed this format actually wrote characters and plot into it. 3 out of 10. Gundam Age was great in concept. I was honestly wary of this one, expecting it to be more childish, based on the art style, but it was just as serious as the other ones. A Gundam series showing a prolonged conflict through 3 generations sounds great, and would really be able to show how terrible war is, as Gundam is wont to do. And the first arc was honestly really good, showing how a young boy can come to completely hate a different group of people, and carry that with him through his life. Unfortunately, it's downhill from there. The second arc was very weak, with a terribly executed rivalry that I heard that they tried to fix in a compilation movie, but again, just watching the anime. The third arc was better, with Kyo learning that both sides are suffering due to the war and questioning his grandfather's blind hatred of them, but honestly, this would have worked so much better as a second arc. Putting it so late is just awkward, and did not help the already weird pacing. Final arc was alright, I suppose. Good mobile suit designs though, 6 out of 10. Build Fighters was very, very strange. I thought I would be used to seeing such blatant shilling of products after having watched Yu-Gi-Oh!, but I guess I just wasn't used to Gundam doing it. The low stakes really made it hard to care about what was going on, and the characters, other than Nils, were uninteresting. I thought the concept was flawed, but as a later entry showed, not as flawed as I thought, so it really was just the failed writing in this one. 4 out of 10. Also, Sei and Reiji are literally the Virgin and Chad meme. Reconguista in G, where the G stands for garbage. The art style is whack, and that's pretty much everything else with the series. Nothing feels like it fits together. It's strange to see such a poor entry from the man who created Gundam, but it is what it is. I couldn't recommend this one to anyone, unless you really just wanted to see every Gundam like me. 1 out of 10. Build Fighters Try is what sold me on the concept of a non-war Gundam series. The battles felt like they had at least some magnitude of weight and importance, and the characters were much better. The 3 different protagonists really worked, each to show a different aspect of how the Gundam fighters worked, although I didn't like that Fumino only really used SD Gundam models. I also liked that it didn't connect very much to the original Build Fighters after it left off on such a cliffhanger. I thought the other world aspect of that would be explored more, but I guess not. Try made me wish that they had kept up with the model battles for later series, if they were going to continue to do non-war stories. 6 out of 10. Gundam The Origin was a nice type of fan service series. This is the only one where I didn't watch the original release, other than the HD remasters of Seed, but instead I watched the anime version of this OVA series. I loved seeing a prequel to the original, which is much better than seeing things from during the war, though the subtitle of Advent of the Red Comet is not exactly accurate. The first third is actually more focused on Sayla, which I enjoyed, even though it made me even more disappointed that she did nothing after the original series, and the middle third was about Char and was easily the best part, especially once it got into the military. The final third was more of just a potpourri of what a ton of characters were doing in the lead up to the 1-year war, which was still really good. I expected more Char from the series than it gave me, but you get what you get. 8 out of 10. I was very excited for Iron-Blooded Orphans, as it was easily the most hyped Gundam series for me, and I can see why. If this is one of the first ones someone sees, it would appear to be so amazing. But to me, aside from the very good animation, it just didn't hold up. It felt like a worse version of Gundam Wing in the first season, which is still alright, but my main issue is that Mikazuki and Orga were just so unlikable. Mikazuki is easily the worst protagonist of any Gundam. There's just nothing there. Setsuna is more lively than this guy is, and I enjoyed the second season more just because that's when the best character, McGillis, really got to go Chad mode, and he was great. His story was the only part that I really enjoyed about the show. The mobile suits were also very ugly in this one, 4 out of 10. Thunderbolt is another one-year war story, I would have guessed. I did not enjoy it at all. It felt extremely pointless, but at least the soundtracks gave us some good jazz, 2 out of 10. Twilight Axis is okay, I guess. It's quite short. The music was really amazing, which is to be expected when you're based off of an opera. However, it is still trying to make a Gundam movie based off of an opera from the 1800s. 4 out of 10. Build Fighters Battlelogue, which is a fun little OVA series. If you like Build Fighters, you'll like this. 5 out of 10. Build Fighters GM Counterattack was a fun OVA. If you like Build Fighters, you'll like this. 5 out of 10. Build Divers. So the next step after battling with models is to battle in VR. I had such low expectations because of that, but Build Divers was surprisingly good. It was a nice light series with fun and relative stakes, and pretty good animation with some surprising character growth. Good for a quick watch. 5 out of 10. Narrative was a beautiful movie, visually. It also had good music, probably the second best in the whole franchise, of course after Turn A. However, due to my love for Unicorn, I really didn't like how it picked up immediately afterwards and essentially overrode any potential good ending from Unicorn's ending. I at least wanted more Minerva and Benager, but they're barely in this movie, and the new characters who were in it aren't very compelling. I know it really tried to go for explaining more about new types, but I wasn't really interested more in their conception as I was in their powers that had grown. The music, again, was very good though. 6 out of 10. Build Divers Re-Rise is for people who watched the original Build Divers but thought that it just didn't have enough furries. Also, the characters are less interesting and the stakes are somehow even lower. Not the best. 3 out of 10. Build Divers Battlelogue. Well, if you like Build Divers, you'll like Battlelogue. 5 out of 10. So overall, I hope that you liked this video, and don't take any of my ratings too seriously. I mean, what do I know? I always prefer Super Robot anyway, so why did I watch all these real robot shows? I hope that we just get another good and war-focused Gundam series soon. Hopefully Hathaway's Flash ends up being good, who knows? I'm not really that hopeful about it, but who knows?